American half pound of 2 pure beef patties, lettuce, tomato.
Singles going steady.
We're doing it?
Not Southland's Elementary stuff. All right.
This is Singles Going Steady, the podcast dedicated to exploring great singles with a particular eye to the punk, new wave, psychobilly, and DIY eras of the last century. I'm Steve Lux McGowan.
And I'm Poison Adrienne Meddock. And we're in a band, The Beef People, who released a single in 1986 on our own label, Zub Records. But we are record collectors and passionate especially about the expression of pop music perfection that is the single recording. Exploring the mystery of what makes for a great singles, what propelled us to begin this podcast. And this is episode
81.
081. And we've got a really interesting single for you today and some stories to tell. It is the group The Cramps.
Yes.
The Cramps.
The Cramps.
And the single is
Goo Goo Muck.
Goo Goo Muck. Yeah. This is a song that we played in The Beef People.
Yes, we covered this song famously.
And this is a cover as well.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about The Cramps.
Right. They were a band that was around for quite a while. They had pretty much a revolving door membership.
Except for the core.
Yeah, based on the couple that ran the band. There was Lux Interior on the vocals, and Poison Ivy was the guitar player and sometimes the bass player.
Right, and they began as a group that had no bass. It was guitar, Lux's amazing vocals, and stripped down drums.
Sometimes 2 guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of invented the psychobilly, the modern sort of. They took a lot of stuff from the 50s. A lot of Hazel Adkins type stuff, a lot of crazy old rockabilly, psychobilly.
This was the term psychobilly was often applied anew to the Cramps. That was not like an old style.
Kind of invented their own style, really.
Yeah. There's a lot of things stirred into the stew. They've got their love of sort of classic rockabilly and sort of like pre-Beatles era surf music, guitar music.
A lot of crazy like B-movie and horror
grindhouse horror. They were from California. You've got a lot of that sort of things that seem to be in the water, at least as we perceived them from afar.
As they went along in their career, they got pretty famous for their sexual double entendres.
Right. And not particularly shielded ones, right? I mean, these were pretty obvious.
Not super
barely
clever.
an entendre, right?
Yes.
It was right there.
Yeah, more like a half tundra.
Right.
So,
isn't that the new car that's coming out? The new pickup from Ford, the half tundra?
Half tundra, yes. Okay, so the single we're going to talk about was released in 1980. It's called Goo Goo Muck. It was on IRS Records, and we'll talk a little bit more about IRS as we go along. But the song is a cover from a band, Ronnie Cook and the Gaylords in 1962. And we're going to play you a little bit of the Ronnie Cook version from 1962. Some people don't realize that this is a cover, and many people haven't heard this version.
Right.
It's pretty interesting. So let's check that out from 1962. Ronnie Cook and the Gaylords, Teenage Goo Goo Muck.
When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, I turn into a teenage Goo Goo Muck. I cruise through the city and I roam the streets, looking for something that is nice to eat. You'd better duck when I show up, the Goo Muck. I'm the night-head hunter looking for a head. With the way out body underneath that head. I'll get you, baby, with a little luck. I'm a teenage tiger and a cuckoo buck. You better duck when I show up, the Goo Muck.
Okay, so there's Goo Muck, the original version from '62. We were talking about it earlier. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that Georgie Fame song, Yeah Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's got that sort of
bouncy sax sort of,
when
what did you say? It was like music to strip by.
Yeah. I mean, this is the sort of music that like grown-ups might hear in a cocktail bar.
Yeah.
Back, I'm thinking of like...
back when the saxophone was very salacious.
Yeah, and like where you would sit down and have table service for drinks and see a combo.
Right.
This isn't club music. Mm-hmm. This is dining club music, dinner club music, right?
Exactly. So that's where it comes from. And the Cramps, famous for their cover choices, they were both one of the reasons they met and got along so well. Poison and Lux was they were very serious record collectors, and they had all kinds of stuff, obscure stuff from the 50s and things like this and 60s, and they do the song. They do their own version, and we're going to play it now.
Okay. Oh yes.
Goo Muck by the Cramps from 1980.
When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, I turn into a teenage Goo Muck. Yeah, I cruise through the city and I roam the streets, looking for something that is nice to eat. You better duck when I show up, the Goo Muck. I'm the night-head hunter looking for some head with a way-out body underneath that head. Yeah, I'll get you, baby, with a little love, 'cause I'm a teenage tiger and a Goo Muck.
So it's a fairly simple song, simple structure,
Yes.
and for that reason, you can see why, it gave them a lot of room to sort of riff on.
Yeah.
And this is, one of the things when you're selecting a cover, you want something that you can play,
Yes.
and that happened to a band that we know.
Right, yeah. When in the Beef People, this was one of the first songs we learned how to play because it is a very elemental song. It's basically, I think it's D, and E, and maybe has an A in it. It was easy to learn, had a neat little riff in it, and it was fun to clown around with. And so we learned it, and it was part of our set early on, and we played it for quite a ways.
You got a taste of that for the people?
Yeah, we will play a little bit of it. This is us whooping it up back in the day. The Beef People.
Elementally.
Yes, doing their own version of Goo Goo Muck. Here we are.
Oh, and the sun goes down and the moon comes up. That's when I turn into a teenage goo-goo mob. Yeah, I cruise the city and I roam the streets. I'm just looking for something that's to eat. You better duck. I show up. Oh, goo-goo mob. Yeah, the city is a jungle and I'm a beast. I'm a good tiger looking for a beast. Yeah, I want the most, baby, but I'll take the lead. 'Cause I'm a human tiger and a teenage beast. You better duck when I show up. Ah, goo-goo muck! Ow! 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 Understand. And I'm looking for something I don't understand. I'm rolling right around as a beast. I'm a like tiger looking for a beast. You better duck, baby, when I show up. I goo up. Ow! Oh! Ow! Oh! 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 Ow! Goo goo up! Ow! Goo goo up! Goo goo up!
So that's me doing my best Lux interior impression. Jim, before I even talk about Jim, our drummer, I remember we had booked Southern Culture on the Skids in the early days of their band. They came down to Greenville and played.
And they were clearly, inspired by
Very much so,
groups like the
yes.
Cramps.
Mhm. And I was talking with Rick, the guitar player and the singer, and they had played Goo Goo Muck after we booked them during the show. And I was saying, oh, we play that too. And he was like, oh, yeah. We were talking about the Cramps. And I said, well, we learned it because it was so easy to play. And he was like, that's why we learned it.
Right.
So we were the only ones that hit on that idea. And they did a great version of it too, of course. That band was built to play that sort of Crampsy type stuff.
Right.
And went on to have great success and still do with that kind of a twangy rockabilly sound.
Right. it's at that crossroads where you've got, sort of stripped down rock with some country sensibility. Yeah. I think you get that more in Southern culture than you do here with the Cramps. But they, when we say the song was elemental, I mean, they tap into something primal, and kind of, a little bit creepy. Yes. A little bit making fun of things that are creepy. I mean, it's there's a great deal of humor and just pure entertainment here. Yes.
The Cramps, our drummer Jim McNeely was famously known as the Crusher. He got that name from a Cramps song, and so they had a lot of influence on us in their own way, and we always had fun listening to the Cramps. They were on IRS. They were famously friends with Alex Chilton, who produced some of their independent stuff and recorded them at Ardent Studios in Memphis. And he was kind of their production handler for a while, made sure that
in those very early days,
records came out the way they were supposed to. And they were on the IRS label, which was run by Miles Copeland, Stuart Copeland from The Police's brother.
Right.
And the IRS was a very influential American label. They ended up having pretty much all the bands that we really liked. A lot of them.
We've had a couple IRS records that we've featured so far on the podcast. Notably REM, I think.
Yes, REM was the biggie. Yeah. And some really odd things, as well as some very popular things. I had bands like Skafish and and the Cramps were not on IRS for a long time. But the album that this one is on is called Psychedelic Jungle. It's their second record, and it's a really excellent, way to get into the Cramps. It has a lot of really good songs, and don't eat stuff off the sidewalk. And
I think when you think about the Cramps, one of the things that's important here is that you've got Poison Ivy on guitar.
I know.
Right? It starting off on guitar, and that was not the usual.
No.
When you've got
a real groundbreaker.
A real groundbreaker.
A lead guitarist too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, she could play with anyone. She was extremely good at she did her kind of a rockabilly thing. She was excellent at it. Could handle her own. Not just a girl that plays guitar,
Right. She's a very good guitarist.
Inventive. And would play bass on some of the tracks, too.
Right. So probably underappreciated as such, because the Cramps were such a spectacle.
Right.
And, look was an important thing of what the Cramps were putting across. And it's with Lux being this incredibly forceful front person, right? That it's kind of all eyes on Lux, but Poison Ivy was musically pulling the whole thing together.
Yeah, and just a great guitar player. Good music. So, can we hear anybody covering the Cramps besides the Beef People and Southern Culture on the Skins?
Do you know what I was thinking is listening to the original. I was, thinking about lounge. I was thinking about Combustible Edison,
that's a good
sort
idea.
of taking it back to its cocktail roots,
right?
And a Combustible Edison with sort of the shimmery version, the nightclub version,
the upright bass, and the big hollow body guitar. I was thinking about sort of combining the lounge and the rockabilly. I was thinking about the Brian Setzer Orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
I could just hear him up there crooning, and I was a teenage
I think it's Seltzer.
I
think it's Seltzer.
Yeah. Right. We just saw that Simpsons
the Rock
episode.
Camp Simpsons
that he was
episode.
on, and that was great. I can hear him crooning that, and with the horns in the background, doing it kind of the 50s, 60s version. It would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and he may be doing it, right?
Yeah.
A little do we know, right?
Right, exactly. Do you have any recommendations this week?
I've got a recommendation that's probably, an unusual one, which is dollar stores. Like Dollar Tree is one of the ones where literally everything in the store is $1.
That's the one we just went to, right?
Right, and you have to be careful because, well, first of all, let's sort of put aside, there's a lot of plastic junk and sort of, that stuff's already on the earth.
Right.
I don't think you're encouraging the production of it by buying it at the dollar store necessarily.
Right.
And don't let it float off into your local water system. But the dollar store is interesting because it has great bargains, but you also have to be careful because there's some things that really aren't worth $1. Right?
Not worth $1.
Right. It's like, no, that's overpriced at $1.
Right.
And other things, it's like...
Or that's just too out of date for $1.
Right. But books at the dollar store, right? So they've got, overprints, remainders that show up without the cuts.
Yep.
So there's always something interesting at the dollar store.
Yes.
And
I think you managed to spend $25 at the dollar store.
I did. So
that was pretty monumental.
Yeah, I needed a wheelbarrow to get out of the dollar store, but so the dollar store can be great fun, but be careful with the plastic junk. Make sure it's plastic junk that you're going to be responsible for.
My recommendation is to listen to the Cramps, the Psychedelic Jungle record, and also for your band. If you haven't started your band yet, and you should, and listen to songs like Goo Goo Muck and figure out how they work. They're not that hard to take apart. You can. Back in our day, we actually had to figure them out, but now you can just go on the internet and they'll tell you what chords they are. So if you learn 3 or 4 chords, you can play rock and roll. It's the truth.
Yeah, and good rock and roll, solid rock and roll, like Goo Goo Muck. There's nothing wrong with Goo Goo Muck.
Not a thing. So you could play a whole set of that, and next thing you know, you're going to be the next Cramps.
We'll be back in 15 minutes for more Goo Goo Muck.
That's right. So, don't be afraid to take those songs. Usually the ones that sound easy are pretty easy. So check them out, figure them out, and once you start figuring out other people's songs, then you can write your own. That's my recommendation. All right, so this was it.
Singles. And it's we didn't say why it's a great single.
Well, okay. It's simple. It's effective. It's catchy. It's got a great little riff in it, which is very surfy. It's got a crazy story.
Right.
I'm a headhunter out looking for some heads.
Right.
And it's kind of a horror movie, like a miniature horror movie.
It's the horror movie that you can frug to.
Right. Mm-hmm. And as we showed with our version, you can just take it, over the top, and the kids love it.
Sometimes the basics are the best.
Yes, indeed. So this was Singles Going Steady 081, the amazing band The Cramps. Lux Interior is no longer with us. Poison is still around. They're not playing anymore. They had a great run. They put out a lot of cool music. They're worth checking out. This single, especially Goo Goo Muck, is one of our favorites. And anything else?
No, I think not.
All right. Well, we will talk to you again very soon.
We will talk to you soon.
Bye now. To learn more about the artists and recordings we just talked about, visit our website at zubrecords.com and click on the Singles Going Steady icon.
You'll also find links to the persons, places, and things we recommend, and much more.
You can find episodes of Singles Going Steady on our website or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Singles Going Steady is brought to you by the power and majesty of Zub Records. Zub Records. Smart sounds for sharp people.